Hey, I'm David Meerman Scott, and I'm here with my friend, Dr. David J. Ahearn, who's the president of Design Ergonomics. And we're going to talk about your new book. It's great. And it is your blueprint for maximizing dental office productivity. What in the world caused you to write such a book, David?
Well, before we get to that, I want to go ahead and tell everybody why we're actually sitting here with David. David wrote the real book on marketing. If you haven't had a chance to read it, I keep this copy here because this is the first copy I ever got. There's a new edition just came out, but it was so good that the people that I work with were impatient of me reading slowly because there's so much here. So I split it in half.
Nice.
When I first met you, I did this before we ever met. When I first met you, I think you were fairly horrified.
The opposite,
that
actually.
I destroyed a book. I did a nice job of
the opposite,
really,
actually, because as an author, as you know, because you are an author, as an author, nothing warms my little heart better than to see a well-loved book.
That's actually good.
So why did you write this book, The Blueprint for Maximizing Dental Office Productivity?
Before we wrote that, but many years after I had become a dentist, there weren't any books on actually how to succeed in dental practice. There were people who talked about promotion, there were people who talked about clinical procedures, there were people that talked about kind of how to set up an office like everybody else, but nobody told you how to actually make dentistry work in a way that wasn't going to get you killed.
Right.
And so we wrote that just to kind of provide a tool set for doctors, a basic set of things that if you did these, life would get easier. And that became kind of a Bible for a lot of doctors in terms of productivity. But I realized that when you do something for the first time, as much as people are calling and saying that's great, there were a lot of things that I hadn't included in that, and I really hadn't. There's one thing that a guide. This is the next step to that, which is really a blueprint for how somebody can just take and make a practice that is guaranteed to succeed. So that's what this is about.
Cool. So I'm a dentist. Imagine I'm a dentist. I'm not. Imagine I'm a dentist.
Try.
How to make them succeed? The blueprint to help them to be successful. What are a couple of the elements that they might find in this book or that you suggest that people do?
People hire us as designers of their dental office. That's how most people come to know us. We're the largest independent designer of dental offices. But the design of the dental office is actually a representation of the machine that gets dentistry done. At first, we looked at that technically, but the machine actually has to function in a way that's viscerally acceptable to the customer.
Yeah.
So we have a factory, but the factory doesn't have to be emotionally acceptable to the person that buys whatever we make. They're separate. Dentistry is one of the only places where you have surgical theater. Now, they call them surgical theaters. Well, that was for the surgeon watching the other surgeon. It wasn't for the patient's sleeping. Most dentistry is done conscious. And so the patient is a participant in the process. It's terrifying for most folks.
Yeah.
And so we had to make it a better process, but then we also had to make it a better environment to be acceptable to the client. And so that the elements that you have in that, dentists understand how to do procedures. They do not have no one ever in dental school do they say, if you've got these 5 procedures, what order do you do them in? How do you go ahead and make sure that you can stage equipment supplies for each one of those so the room isn't a chaotic disaster so that by the time you get to the 4th procedure, your workspace is virtually unusable. So those are the kind of things that we figured out how to structure and make logical and easy on a daily basis.
So it sounds to me like there's a number of different elements, and I'm only guessing, but when those elements are working in concert, it's like multiples of success.
Yeah, but what I had no idea, I started working on this by studying Toyota. They're the most productive manufacturer on earth. And so I thought, since, again, no one in dental school said, oh, by the way, you're a manufacturer. I mean,
Right,
heaven
and nobody
forbid. We couldn't even call the things that we use tools. We had to call them instruments. And somehow that was like, they were blessed if they were instruments, and it was a terrible thing. It was a tool. So, I mean, to this day, like a dentist cannot call something a tool. And I mean, just weird. And because somehow if it was a tool, that we were manufacturers. We're manufacturers.
Yeah.
And again, it's manufacturing theater.
Right.
So, but on the manufacturing side, I knew that I could increase performance. I knew that I could make life easier for me. So much of this was about trying to make this work for me. What I didn't realize was that it wasn't just an additive situation, that it was multiplicative, that doctors that do this are 3 and sometimes 4 or 5 times as productive as the national average.
Wow.
I mean, it astounded me. This is an embarrassing story. I wound up almost 4 times as productive as the national average.
Why is that embarrassing? That's
It was
great.
embarrassing because I thought, that wasn't the embarrassing part. The embarrassing part was, I thought that was because I was special.
Okay.
And so when doctors called and said, well, hey, I'm twice as productive almost instantly, I went like, good for you.
Yeah, yeah.
I was like, no, I owe more. I mean, so part of what caused this is I owe everybody the ability to be there and beyond where I was.
Right.
And so we have associates that are a couple of years in practice that are now, a couple of years in practice already at close to my productive level at my peak.
Wow.
And it's phenomenal. It's fantastic. And so now my mission actually is to take them to the next level, and every other doctor that we work with. So part of the reason for writing this is my obligation to go ahead and make that happen.
And I can see it on your face. You love this, don't you? You are evangelical about this. It's not. This is
not a
more
job.
than your work.
I don't have to work.
This is your passion, and when you see a dentist and you hear of a dentist being successful, there's probably nothing better for you.
Yeah, we have just every day there's a doctor there's an office opening somewhere, and we get to share, and I know what's going to happen for that person. I know that their life is going to be transformed.
Yeah.
I know there's going to be more charity done in that town, that the healthcare of that community is going to get better, because they're not going to do this much dentistry. You're going to do this much dentistry. You're going to do this much awesome dentistry.
Right.
I can't cure cancer. I can't solve world peace. The list of things I'm not good at is this long. I can do this.
And imagine the numbers of people and families that you touch, because every one of those dentists has a loved ones, family members.
Yeah.
Every patient that they serve, you are now touching each one of them, and
that's what gets
you are so additive in the positivity of the universe.
That's what gets me up in the morning. My wife came home the other night. She had been away for the day, and she came home at the dining room table. She's like, "What are you doing?" It's Saturday, right? And it's like, "Well, I've got an idea for the ultimate hygiene room." And he's like,
"It's Saturday."
It's Saturday, and there's like this 30 years you've been. But wait, this thing is going to be awesome, and it's got it all drawn out, and I can't wait to come back to the designers. And I feel lucky.
That's awesome.
Quite honestly.
My favorite part of the book, I loved, not your words, but the way I see it, the neuroscience of space and design. I'm fascinated by that. I've written 13 books, and one of them called Fanocracy, I dug in deep to the idea of neuroscience, because there's so much going on in our brains that we don't understand.
Fanocracy, by the way, great written with your daughter, a
My
physician
daughter,
who
thank
totally
you.
gets it. It's like
Yeah.
really cool.
Yeah, a female
yeah.
emergency room doc and this guy writing a book
Yeah,
together.
it's really-
But the neuroscience stuff was so interesting. And you talked about the neuroscience of space, and you were talking about the neuroscience of when you walk into an operatory, a patient walks into an operatory, and what do they see, what do they feel? Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, I knew that somewhere around 50% of the population dreaded going to the dentist to some level. We treated a large number of folks that were in that cohort, and I knew some of the things intuitively that we were doing that were more right than not for them. But the mission was to go ahead and quadruple doctor performance. So I had to figure out, like you could probably have the handpieces more comfortably accessed if you put them on coil cords from the ceiling, right? Just like Jiffy Lube. Well, that obviously for an awake patient was not going to work.
Yeah.
That had been tried, actually. Someone that didn't get this. So I tend to obsess on things. For example, the time I spent 18 months studying Myers-Briggs to understand how that worked. 18 months that I can never get back. It's a good thing I'm happy with what I got. I decided to study everything that I could about this. And so I hired a NASA ergonomist who had just finished up working on the space shuttle at the time to go ahead and, because putting somebody in a metal can for a couple of weeks turns out to be very unhealthy if it's claustrophobic. I studied, so there were some folks from NASA, there were some folks from MIT who understood lighting and its effects on psychology of space. And then from there, I actually worked with magicians. I worked with a famous magician who had performed at Lincoln Center recently at that time, and I was lucky enough to be able to interact with that person. And so each one of those brought a piece of the puzzle together of how people process information. And so,
which is, by the way, hardwired.
It's hardwired.
You can't
change it.
Yeah.
So at first it was like, oh crap, it's hardwired. Then it was like, oh, that's great. It's hardwired. We can go ahead and build to the rules of that. I mean, you can't change the rules because it's hardwired, but you can go ahead and build to those rules and create something that will work instantly in a tenth of a second with the patient, and they will never have any idea, they will never see it, they will never have any cognition of why it works. And so that's one of the things that dentists actually struggle most with, because it's not intuitive. Because you cannot figure it out in the cerebral cortex. You got to figure out the math and survey research, and you got to figure out with data. You can't fully understand it because it's not here, it's in here.
So interesting. And this little place we're in right now is interesting to me. We're in your where some of the magic happens. Not all the magic, but some of the magic happens here. It's your design studio, and there's all sorts of cool stuff going on. I found some moss, as a matter of fact.
I try to sneak up here as often as possible.
So tell me what happens here.
What happens here is really where all of the things, so the elements of a great design can be codified. And I'm not saying that each office is an individual, but there are principles that make this work. They're highly productive and emotionally acceptable to the patient, and allow us to communicate between the front and the back of the office, create flow that allows all of that production to break through. This is where that's interpreted into plans. And then with that brought into the vision of what a doctor has for the office. And so this is where the magic all comes together in terms of taking a doctor's dream, adding hopefully some of the things that we know, as many as the doctor will accept. And not every doctor can really fathom all of the pieces. It's okay. We work for them. But again, with the book, it kind of helps doctors to understand what's possible, and see, and we get to share the experiences of other doctors to go ahead and hopefully build a bigger view for what's possible.
Surprisingly, at the end of the book, you took a little bit of a left turn. I was sort of curious about that. You ended up talking about teams and team dynamics.
I never
and
wanted to go
a couple
ahead
of
and do
interesting things there. So
Yeah,
tell us about that.
My goal was to skate only in a lane that discussed the technology of what this delivered, both physically and psychologically. I failed at that in, we know this because we do this. And so probably 10 years ago, I was trying to go ahead, so we try to create systems that are so simple that people naturally just evolve through. But my belief is if I create something so pure, like a hammer, a 2-year-old picks up a little plastic hammer and pretty much knows what to do with it because it's a pure design.
Yeah.
So my belief was clouded by that ethos. And our employees and coworkers join us and then grow. And that was working wonderfully. But that's not good enough. And so one day I thought, my job is really to advance the lives of my teammates. And if I want them to advance to the highest level, I'm supposed to give them tools.
Right.
And so I want people to climb. I was like, that's a ladder. And I was proud of it for a second, and then I thought, well, it's stupid that I didn't, for the decade before that, hadn't really thought that I need to give my people ladders to climb. And so we started to develop ladders for every single role in the practice. And I knew the day that a new employee came to me and asked me to personally, when I personally talked to them, she said, so I'm new here, but how fast can I climb the ladder? I thought, I think this is working.
Yeah, right.
Okay, I said, Katie, you could climb the ladder as fast as you want to climb it. She said, what if I climb past people? I said, well, it's just absolutely fine. Go ahead and give them a hand as you're climbing, okay, and help them climb too. Yeah. And so a lot of it is about how to build a team that embraces that ability to control their own success, to empower people. Too often, people have jobs and they're not sure how to become better next year. Well, that was my fault.
Right.
And I still lament the decade before I figured that out. So I felt obliged to go ahead and make sure that we include all those things that we know on that side of the work that we do, because once you get people once the opportunity is that great to grow, you're going to go ahead and expand people, you're going to expand hours, you're going to expand the number of rooms you have, because the main thing in this is dentistry no longer has to kill you. There's a central tenet that dentists carry that somehow they have to pay with their hide to go ahead and be more prosperous. That they have to go ahead and sell something more, or charge more.
Right.
None
or
of
work
that,
longer
or work
hours.
longer. Yeah, none of that is true. Our job is to make it easier to do the job.
Right.
And so, my best job, I love this job. I love this job of designing. I love this job of making more productive equipment. Best job I ever had was full-time being a dentist. What I should have done is just figure this out.
Yeah.
And just probably not tell anybody. Okay, but it's I wasn't made to do that. The mission is to go ahead and make dental care make dentists more prosperous, make care more affordable, make more charity possible. That's the mission. Yeah. But to go ahead and not tell others, that would be wrong.
Yeah. So my last question. As I read the book, and as I know you and I know the company, it seems like my view that much of what you teach is a mindset. It's a very positive kind of mindset that once you adopt the mindset, you can take your practice to huge heights. You can go from a 4-op to a 30-op. You can have multiple offices. So imagine you're speaking to some people now who are just starting out on the journey to go to that kind of mindset. My first recommendation, of course, is to buy the book. But what would be not long-term, 6 months or a year, but near-term, right now, what are some things people could do right now to increase their dental office productivity as they're thinking about going on the extended journey that you teach?
Well, actually, if someone has an existing office, we only recently, last few years, I agreed, my staff's been pushing me for a long time, to come out and actually clinically train and modify existing offices to go ahead and get as much of this as possible in the space they've got.
Gotcha.
And you know, again, it's another thing I need to apologize for. I resisted that for years because I thought, you know, the cost of a dental facility should only be 5% of total production. It's noise. So a 5-chair office, 5%. 10-chair office, 5%. 20-chair office, 5%. There's no reason not to grow. The cost of facilities is the cost of people.
Right.
And the inefficient use of people by having inefficient systems is where your expense is. And so I just thought, just build the damn office.
Yeah.
And I was wrong because many people can't because they're not very productive. And they believe that dentistry is killing them. And they believe that if they can just save enough money to go ahead and quit, maybe sell the thing to the man, then they're going to get enough money to go ahead and live and do something else. Well, guess what? The something else ain't that great. I mean, if you can go ahead and vacation for 50 weeks of a year, God bless you.
Or play golf for
most
50.
people can't.
Yeah.
Most people wind up, those workers wind up in something called divorce, where you get like half the money you used to have, and then that's probably not enough to do what the thing you were trying to do with the fooling around for 50 weeks a year. So it doesn't really work. So if the opportunity is there to make your existing practice great, and you can have us spend a couple of days with you, that's a good place to start. And many, many times we can just untangle something that has been a nagging mess for an office for a decade and suddenly make them, you know, quite productive in that. But I'll promise everybody that once you do that, it tends to become infectious because you want to go ahead and say, well, since it doesn't hurt anymore, since it's not giving me a headache anymore to go ahead and deal with this, why don't I do actually more of this? Right. Or I can have other people come in with me to do this, because now it's not complicated to teach them. It's now simple to go ahead and teach them.
Super cool. Thank you for writing the book, Your Blueprint for Maximizing Dental Office Productivity. Great book. Dr. David J. Ahearn here with me today.
Thank you. And thank you for being a friend and helping us communicate this better.
You got it.